Professor Kramer, thank you for being here.
Happy to do it.
Can you share a time when you changed a long-held belief and what influenced that change?
There are a million examples of long-held beliefs that I changed, from everything from believing in God when I was young and giving that one up. And that was a product, well, they'll all be the same thing, I think. They're a product of actual experience, kind of reflecting on my experience, to recognizing that if you're inside a university, it's not all about being a faculty member or your research, or all about your research and your teaching. Actually, other people matter. And while that might not seem so important to you, if your life and career are being inside a university, that's actually a pretty big sea change. My political beliefs have evolved. So I don't think of it as like I had an epiphany and one day I thought the opposite of what I thought earlier. It's more like they evolved gradually. But the positions I hold today would be like unrecognizable to the person who was a college senior. And so all of those are just a product of experience. The belief in God in some ways was the toughest. I was a religion major. I was thinking that I was going to spend my life on that, and spent my junior year abroad in Israel and then to study religion. And over the course of the year, just kind of had to acknowledge to myself, if I was being honest, that much as I really wanted to, it just wasn't there. It just didn't make sense. But all of them have been a product of, as I say, just experience and being honest with myself about what I actually believed and thought.
Would you say that your course at university and studying religion played a large part in dissuading you from believing in God?
It didn't play a part in dissuading me. It just wasn't enough to sustain it against the actual reflection of life, looking at what was happening in my own life, in the world, to some extent from studying it, just how hard people had to work in order to justify a belief that was kind of where you were believing in a being who had created a world that was completely contrary to everything that you were being told about what this being supposedly thought. And so I used to jokingly say, although my wife died 2 years ago, and at the time I was very angry, and I actually just said this, if there is a God, he's an asshole. You can't make sense of diseases like cancer or a lot of the things people do to each other. So I wouldn't blame God for that. That would be our fault. But there's so many things that we don't, that either that or he's a really, really bad designer. But it was a jokey way of making the point that just as I got older and tried to explain the world as I saw it, the belief just didn't line up with experience. And as I say, that's been true for every chain. So it's really just a matter of being honest about what you're learning from your actual experience in the world.
Are there any beliefs you feel you will never abandon, and why?
Well, of course, never say never, but core beliefs to me, well, there's, again, probably a lot of those. But what occurred to me as I thought about this was I believe that what matters are the people we touch as opposed to abstractions. This will go directly to what you're saying. So it's not that abstractions don't matter, politics matter. What I think about is happening in the world matters. They're important things. But at the end of the day, my relationships with the people that I'm actually in relationship with should matter more. And I don't think that the people who I touch, that should matter more. So I don't think that will ever change. It hasn't yet. Nothing that I've ever experienced has shaken that. And if you think about the last few years, when there are things happening in the world, whether it's Israel, Gaza, or American democracy dissolving, or climate change happening, and I'm with people who are in all different positions on all those things, at the end of the day, the idea that I would let the abstraction end a relationship with someone that I'm actually in an actual relationship, most of which is not about our beliefs about those things, I think that's important to me to keep those priorities straight.
What does it mean to disagree well?
I've given a lot of thought to this one. To me, what it means to disagree well is to try and understand how something that might seem completely unreasonable to me can seem reasonable to somebody else. So much today of argument, there's three kind of dodges that people use to avoid actually engaging on the substance of a position that somebody else is articulating that they think is wrong. There's the straw man version, where I take the weakest version of your argument and make it as if that's the only argument, and then I destroy that weak version and like believe that I've taken care of your argument and I don't need to think about it anymore. Then there's the version where what I assume is you actually, in your heart of hearts, you know I'm right, because I'm so obviously right. And you have some bad reason. You have self-interest, or you're racist, or something. You have some bad reason for taking the position that you do. So again, I don't actually have to confront your position. Or the third one that's most recent is this identity dodge, where I can dismiss you because you're a white man or a Black Lives Matter supporter or a member of a union, or you work in the oil industry. Whatever it is, I don't have to deal with your argument because obviously you're making it because of who you are. So to me, it's really important not to fall into any of those traps and to just take the argument on its merits try and understand how it seems so wrong to me. How is it that it seems right to you? Like if I were looking at it through your eyes, how would I understand it? So to me, disagreeing well is both sides, both people doing that. To do that means first and above all, you have to put aside in having an argument with somebody else, you're not demonstrating who you are. It's not about that. If it's about that, if that's the performative stuff, what's most important is that you see who I am. And therefore, I'm not going to engage with you because what this argument is about is it's important for you in the world to see who I am. So you have to put that aside. You have to put emotions to some extent aside, the emotional reactions that just you don't have to give them up. You have to put them aside if you want to engage productively with someone who thinks very differently from you. So it's all those things. It's not rocket science. It's bizarre to me that people think you have to have special training to disagree. I will often say to my students, don't you have brothers or sisters, family, friends? You've been disagreeing your whole life with people who you managed to disagree with without it ending the relationship. But whatever, it didn't used to be like this. No one would have thought they needed to do what you're doing 3 decades ago, honestly. And it's not that we don't need to do it. We clearly do. So it's an interesting question to ask, what changed over the past 3 decades that people now seem to find it so difficult to actually deal with people who they disagree with? It's not like the issues are harder or more controversial or people care more than we did when we were young. Something else has changed. But the fundamental attitude is I want to learn, I want to understand. None of that requires me giving up who I am. It might change how I think. It might not. But then I can think about that. So that's what I think is necessary to disagree well, is just attitude.
Do you think there's something in particular that has changed, as you said, between, let's say, 3 decades ago and right now, where it's caused this inability for people to just have productive discussions, especially about topics surrounding politics?
I can point to a bunch of things, the kind of things people typically point to. So social media is obviously a culprit, but it's a latecomer to the game. This was happening before social media or even the internet existed. So the internet and social media, though, have been massive accelerators of this trend. And some of that is because so much of the exchange by that device isn't face-to-face. It's not between people who are actually dealing with each other in person. So it becomes easy to move to extreme positions and use language that you wouldn't otherwise use. But it does predate that. So I think some of it has to do with leadership. We developed a more irresponsible group of leaders who cared more about winning than about maintaining solidarity within their communities. And so instead of we're all X, whatever X is, and we disagree about stuff, let's figure out how to accommodate our disagreements. It became, I'm X, you're not, or you're out to destroy X. And that was from the top down, political leadership, media leadership. But that's because they found that it sold and it seemed to work. So appealing to people's worst nature does work. Unfortunately, responsible leadership doesn't appeal to people's worst nature. So I think that was a part of it. There were real social differences that emerged. We sorted ourselves more. So we encounter people unlike ourselves in beliefs less frequently. So they're not people, they're just abstractions out there. So you can attribute bad motives to them more easily. Wealth inequality increased, lots of things that separated us more. But at the end of the day, I was a historian. And one of the things you learn, I think, doing history is that everything after the fact looks overdetermined. There were more causes than you think there need to be. So there's lots and lots of reasons, and I can't point to one. It's just been a general and growing trend for quite some time.
And my final question is, how can schools and universities promote good disagreement and try and facilitate these good conversations that we're meant to have?
Obviously, first and foremost, by modeling them. So how teachers teach, not every teacher does. But a good teacher encourages disagreement, but also models how to take another position seriously and treat the person who is taking it with respect because you're trying to understand what they have to say. A lot of it is signaling. So that's a form of modeling. It's like how you are. It's not telling people that they need to disagree well. Modeling is one version of it, but it's also in between the lines when you're talking about other things, taking it as a matter of course that, of course, people will disagree well where they disagree. And so however you're talking about the thing and whatever you're doing, it's implicit but unmistakable. But that's an assumption. So you're building it into your culture. Now, those kinds of things can sustain it if it's already there. When you've lost it to the extent that we and most universities have, then you have to rebuild it. So now you do have to be explicit. A big part of my welcome speech to the students is that they should expect to encounter people whose views they hate and think are wrong and upset them and challenge their identity. And if we want that for them, if that isn't happening, we're failing. The last thing we should be doing is protecting them from it, but that we don't need to just expose them to it. We need to then help equip them with tools to deal with it. And then we have the obligation to do that. So trainings, we have in the welcome sessions for students, we have something called the LSE 100 course that everybody takes, and it has built into it sub-modules about all of this. So there's formal training involved, events, bottom up, top down, you have to just make it a constant part of the conversation in terms of your expectations and what you're modeling for people. And I think universities can do a lot in that respect because we have students, and almost every setting they're in with us is one in which people should be able to disagree about things. And then there's the flip side, which is when people don't disagree well, you do have to observe rules. So if the rule is you can't disrupt a speaker because you disagree with them, if somebody disrupts the speaker, you have to punish them. If the rule is you can't block an event from happening just because you don't like it, then if somebody blocks the event, you have to punish them. And you have to be consistent about that. Doesn't matter what side, doesn't matter what issue, right? And that's hard, but those are the things you have to do. So it's both sides. You're trying to create an environment. And then part of the training and the signaling is if you're really trying to understand and persuade, which is what you should be doing, then you're going to talk to somebody differently than if what you really want to do is hurt them or show how superior you are, right? So you want to create a culture in which people aren't using the kind of language that inflames and instead are using language that is less likely. And on the flip side, you want to prepare people that no matter how much training you give, it's going to happen, intentionally or not, and making them more resilient. So getting out of this weird notion that language that you hate is violence and that you're unsafe, as opposed to it's upsetting. And that's the thing you have to learn to deal with, is an important part of this as well. You can't disagree if people can shut off disagreement and insist that it go away because it's violence. It's interesting. I was talking to somebody about this today. That analogy between language as violence and physical violence as violence has been around for a long time, but it's been taken to an extreme that was not the original. The original idea was to get people to really acknowledge that language could hurt, which it can. But the hurt is very different from a punch in the face. And we've slowly lost that sense that it was a metaphor to help urge people to be aware and cautious of the language they used, and been taken literally as it's violence and therefore it has to be stopped. And that's a totally different thing. So we have to handle all of those things.